Well, hey there, guys. Greetings and salutations, and welcome back to the channel for this, our final The Last of Us open spoiler after show discussion of the season. Of course, season 1 had its season finale last night that I watched after the Oscars. And man, what a terrific ending. I absolutely loved it. Wasn't my favorite episode of the year, but I absolutely loved it nonetheless. By the way, whenever I'm doing these shows by myself without any technical support around me, just want to ask you guys able to see and hear me okay? Everything looking and sounding all right? Good to know. And that's what we're going to do here today. We are going to sit here, and everybody's saying that the sound and audio is good. Awesome. Thank you. We are going to talk about last night's episode of The Last of Us in an open, spoilery kind of way. If you have not seen the episode yet, you have been warned. We are going to talk about it in a full open, spoilery way. Now, I also need to point this out. I know there are many of you, or at least some of you, that don't know anything about The Last of Us Part 2. And so I feel like it's only fair to warn you that during this after show, the only way, and I wrestled with this, I struggled with this a little bit this afternoon, but really the only way we can talk about the significance of certain things that happened in this episode is to also kind of touch on a couple of things that will happen in the next season, at least in the first couple of episodes of the next season. Now, normally we don't want to get into open spoiler discussion about stuff that hasn't happened in the show yet. But again, for me, I just don't know how to talk about the importance and significance about a couple of things in this episode without also alluding to things that are coming in the next season. So I need to warn you guys that while we will not be giving away how next season ends or anything like that, there are a couple of important plot points that will happen early in the next season that we're going to have to get into. So I just want to give you that warning right up front. If you don't want to hear anything about what happens next season, it doesn't matter if it's just in the first episode or whatever, you may not want to watch this episode. I mean, that's not a good YouTube strategy to tell people not to watch your video. I understand that, but I just felt it's only fair to give you guys that warning and let you know. All right. So with that down, this is how we're going to do this. I'm going to talk about my overall thoughts and opinions about last night's episode for a few minutes, and then we're going to spend the majority of our time taking your comments and questions about last night's episode of the final episode of the first season of Last of Us, which is one of, I gotta say, a top 10 show of the past 10 years. A top 10 show of the past 10 years for me. At the very, very least, a top 10 show of the past 5 years. Maybe the top 10 of the past 10 as well. And I think the best show on television right now. So yeah, anyway, let's talk about last night's episode. Okay. So got to start with the thing that was not in the game. And, you know, we've been saying all season, it is amazing how this show has so closely, beat for beat, followed the game much of the time. And then when they would deviate from the game, they actually elevated the story. Like every time they did something in the show that was not in the game, it made the story better. I mean, episode 3, right, with Bill and Frank. You know, I went to go see Nick Offerman live a couple of nights ago. He was performing at Harrah's Casino just outside of San Diego. Ann and I got tickets to go and watch him. And he talked about episode 3 of The Last of Us. He said, it's crazy. People don't even say the name of the show. They just say episode 3. That's all people have to say. Just say episode 3 and everybody knows what you're talking about. It's absolutely crazy. And he talked about that. Nick Offerman was great. He's like, you know, you've been following this Last of Us show. And if you see my episode in there, and like everybody yells and claps, he goes, and then he goes, are there any homophobes in the audience tonight? Which is pretty funny. Anyway, episode 3, probably the best episode of the year, but still. But so that's just one example of how when they did change stuff, it just made the story better. So they followed very closely and took liberties. And whenever they took liberties, they elevated the story. Last night for me, when they started the episode with, I forget the actress's name, the voice of Ellie in the game, and she's also in Vox Machina, Ashley something. Anyway, I can't remember. One of you guys in the live chat who knows her name, go ahead and fire that in the live chat. It starts off with her and playing Ellie's mom. Ellie was playing Ellie. Ashley Johnson. Thank you, guys. Caleb and Darth and Ahmed. Ashley Johnson. So that was completely not in the game, because that's all starting. I'm turning to the other people in the room with me who were watching the movie. We had a bunch of people over last night. I said, this isn't in the game, is it? Like, I don't remember this from the game. And they're like, no, this is totally new. It was so good because the scene itself was fantastic. It actually gives us a little bit of an understanding about why is Ellie special? Why does she have this immunity? So it gave us the foundation for understanding that, but it also gave us a connection between Ellie and Marlene that we never knew. And it deepened our understanding of Marlene's dedication to getting Ellie to where she needs to be, but it also helps us better appreciate how difficult it would be for Marlene, who saved her best friend's baby while having to kill her own best friend to save this child's life, get the child to safety, all that kind of stuff. But she was willing, for the sake of all humanity, to sacrifice that young girl. And having drawing a connection between Marlene and Ellie all the way back to Ellie's birth, I think it made that moment at the end of the episode all the more profound, right? So because it really was key that, Joel couldn't say to her, you wouldn't understand, because yes, she would. She's the only person who would understand. I was the one who saved that baby when her mother was turning into one of the infected, and I had to kill my own best friend and take this baby. I was there when this baby was born. This is the daughter of my best friend. So if anybody in this world understands, it's me, right? And it was just a fabulous addition. Fabulous. I said on the show this morning that it was a scene we needed that I never realized or never understood or, again, realized that we needed. That was a scene we needed and we never knew it. And again, they just elevated the damn show. It was so well done. Then, of course, we get into them. Ellie is still dealing with the trauma of what happened in the last episode with nearly being chopped up and murdered and burned and raped and everything you can throw at her. She had to face in that last thing, watching the horrors. So she's still dealing with that trauma. She's a little despondent, obviously. And then they come to the giraffe scene. The giraffe scene was, again, a microcosm of one of the things that has been the key thing about this entire show. That the moments of beauty in a world that's gone to hell, right? We talked about that a lot in episode 3, about in this world that's gone to hell, in this world of complete chaos, these two people made something beautiful. They made a beautiful life together. And and when you have the background of that to contrast against the hopelessness of the world, it's incredible. And we've talked several times about that as the series. That's been a constant theme of this show. The emphasis of the beauty within the horror, right? And that's why, again, this just the simple scene with a giraffe coming out of what Ellie just faced in the last episode. The most unimaginable, traumatic, awful, awful, awful garbage that she's been dealing with, to then just have a moment, this beautiful moment of feeding a giraffe. I mean, normally, if that was just a scene playing out in the normal world, right? If that was just a scene in a Parks and Rec episode, okay, oh yeah, cool. I mean, they got to feed a giraffe. But in a world that is dark and doomed and all that kind of stuff, having those little moments of beauty really make you appreciate the beauty. Because seriously, who would have thought? Tell somebody at the beginning of the year, by the way, there's going to be a show this year where there's going to be a scene where a girl feeds a giraffe and it's going to totally warm your heart. It's like, a girl feeding a giraffe, big deal. But in the world of The Last of Us, a girl just feeding a giraffe, having that moment, coming out of what she was coming out of, it was just so beautiful. And again, that's just indicative of what this show has done all season long. emphasizing and making us appreciate the moments of beauty in the darkness. And that is such an overwhelming theme of the show that, and ultimately what brings Joel out of his shell, I guess, for the lack of a better term. Anyway, so then they get picked up by, of course, by the Fireflies, and the ultimate big conundrum. They don't waste time getting to the big conundrum. Marlene is sitting there with Joel and says, here's the deal. We believe, our one doctor believes that she holds the key to a cure, or at least a vaccine, but they got to go in and retrieve it out of her brain. It's going to kill her, but it could save the world. It could save the world. Right? And Joel, here's the thing. I had a conversation with a friend of mine this morning who really didn't like yesterday's episode, or at least didn't like the fact that Joel suddenly turned into a mass murderer. And make no mistake, that's what he was. He was a mass murderer. But my argument about that was, if you have followed the show and you understand the Joel from episode 1, and then the Joel we got in episode 2, and the Joel he has become since episode 2 certainly up until episode 8 and now into episode 9, I said, I think you're a little crazy if you don't fully embrace that this character we've seen, that's exactly what he would have done in that situation. Like, I heard some people saying all of a sudden Joel just loses it. No, it's not all of a sudden. If you've watched this show, if you knew everything about Joel that this show has told us so far, I don't know what show you're watching if you don't recognize that what Joel did in episode 9 is exactly what that Joel would have done that we've been watching all season long. A guy who tried to kill himself because of the death of his own daughter. He saw that life had no meaning. He lived like that for 20 years. And all of a sudden, he has learned to love again. And he's found this person that he first looked at as cargo and now calls baby girl. Something he hasn't said since the death of his daughter. And now he has that again. A guy who has lost a daughter once. And then for 20 years has been in a completely despondent state, not caring whether he lives or dies, and now feels like he loves again in this relationship with Ellie. If you don't think that Joel would have gone on a murderous rampage to save that little girl, to save his new daughter, then I don't know what show you've been watching. Now, I'm not saying that what Joel did was right, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. I'm not saying what Joel did was right, not at all. That's part of the dichotomy of belief on that scene, but we'll get to that in a minute. What I am saying is what Joel did is 1,000% consistent with what the Joel we have watched for the first 8 episodes would have done. And if you don't recognize that, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the show. Now, that then brings us to the decision he makes, which is, I'm going to put my relationship with this young girl and her life above the life of everybody else on the planet. And I'm going to kill everybody in this building to do it, and condemn every other living soul on the planet to continue to live in this misery and in this hell that the world has become. He makes that decision. And meanwhile, he's going around and killing people that are trying to save the world. I want you to remember this. Why they made them kind of jackasses, like pushing them, hey, keep walking, making them kind of jackasses. Remember, everybody in that building that Joel killed was trying to save the world. Every guard, every doctor, every nurse, every Marlene, all of them. All the people that he killed were simply people who were there, like putting their lives on the line to try to save the world. And those are the people that Joel killed. Those are the people that Joel murdered. Even the people who were incapacitated and down and out of action, they couldn't do anything now. He would still point at them again and finish them off. A doctor doing nothing but holding a scalpel. Boom, bullet to the head for your troubles. And we all know, many of us know, that has ramifications. We'll talk about that in just a little bit too. So, to use a Star Trek thing, Rob would be proud. To use a Star Trek thing, Spock would say, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And so I get it. Joel, and Druckmann and Mazin talk about this after the show. They say, listen, a parent will burn the world to save their kid. That doesn't make it right, but a parent will burn the world to save their child. And even if it meant saving their child meant the death of hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of other people, they wouldn't care, right? They just wouldn't care. But at the end of the day, was it right or wrong? The one hope for the world was Ellie. And them doing that procedure on her was the one hope the world had. And not only did Joel take that away from the world, he took the choice away from Ellie. Now, granted, you can make the argument that the Fireflies should have also given Ellie the choice, right? Absolutely. 100% I agree with you on that. The Fireflies themselves should have given Ellie the choice. But do any of us not believe that Marlene was right? When Marlene said to Joel, she would do this. If we had given Ellie the choice, she would choose to do this. Do any of us disagree with Marlene? I don't disagree with her. And Joel didn't disagree with her either. Joel knew she was right. If they sat down Ellie and said, listen, we think you are the key to saving the world. However, it's going to mean you're going to have to sacrifice yourself in us for us to be able to try. What do you think Ellie would have done? Ellie would have done it. I mean, we don't know for sure because that doesn't happen in the show. But does any of us doubt that Ellie would have said, F yes, this is the reason I'm alive. This is my purpose. This is why I've made it this far. She would have done it. And Joel took that decision away from her. And Joel so knew that that's what Ellie would have done that at the end of the show, he lies to her. Because if Joel thought that she would have been, no, find somebody else, he would have told her. Because then she would have gone, fuck yes, man, thanks for getting me out of there. But he didn't tell her that. He lied to her because he knew she would not have approved. And he killed Marlene, who was trying to save the world. I mean, it's crazy. So just like the game put us all in a very weird position where we had to decide how we felt about what Joel does at the end of The Last of Us 1. Do we agree with what he did? Do we not agree with what he did? I mean, we've been playing this game, we're building their relationship, so obviously he wants to save her, but he may have just condemned the world to continue to live in this nightmare. And he took and then the show just elevated, because I was watching the show with Ray, right? Ray was one of the people watching it with us, and Ray had no idea how this season ends, right? And so as Joel is going around brutally murdering people, Ray's like, man, I don't know if I like what Joel's doing. And it's like, that's exactly the reaction the showrunners wanted to get from us, right? And they did it masterfully. And it's today still, like we're talking about, discussing, did Joel do the right thing? I'm certain Marlene doesn't think he did the right thing by shooting her in the stomach and then shooting her in the head. I'm sure all the people who are still struggling to survive in the world don't think he did the right thing. Maybe there are some parents who think, hell yes, protect your kid. I mean, I don't know. It's weird, man. It's weird. And I see some people in the live chat and I get the saying, well, they didn't know for sure that the procedure would have worked. I know, but it was the only fucking hope that the world had. They didn't know 100% for sure that it would work. But it was the one only hope they had. And there was no way they could find out if it would work unless they did the procedure. It was the one chance the world had. So, I mean, I get it. They didn't know 100% for sure that this would have saved the world. True. But it's the only chance at saving the world that the world had seen in 20 years. So again, it's a beautiful position that the show puts us as the audience in, to wrestle with and struggle with, what would I have done? I love it when shows can effectively do that, when they make us actually ask ourselves, what would I have done? It's beautiful. And of course, it ends with all that kind of stuff. Now, of course, I was expecting them to make a little bit of a bigger deal out of killing the doctor, but I think making it such just a nonchalant thing, doctor, boom, boom, will emphasize more what comes next year. Because those of you who do know the game of The Last of Us, Joel killing that doctor is going to carry heavy, heavy, heavy consequences. And it should be that way, right? Like when we're running around in first-person shooters and games and we're killing these characters, we got to remember, these are all characters with mothers and fathers, with children of their own, with brothers and sisters and friends and people who loved them, had a history and had a future ahead of them. Every time you kill somebody in one of those games, I mean, speaking from a narrative point of view, you are taking away, it's like Clint Eastwood said in Unforgiven, it's a hell of a thing killing a man. You take away everything he's got and everything he's ever going to have, right? I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I love the fact that this game, once we get into part 2, it's like, yeah, all those people you killed, there are consequences to that. It's not just, oh, well, killed that person, onward we go. There are consequences, and there are heavy, 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 heavy consequences coming. And many will say Joel deserves the consequences that are coming. Some will say they don't. But again, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Beautifully done, beautifully made show. And yeah, there they go. All right, guys, I've said my piece on all this. Let's spend the rest of our time now hearing from you guys about what you guys had to say about this episode. So let's jump over to it here. Cody Hunt says, the scene where they feed the giraffe is very reminiscent of the Brachiosaurus scene in Jurassic Park, Vegisaurus, Lex, Vegisaurus. I mean, again, that moment, that simple little concept, little girl feeding a giraffe. But it moved such an emotion in us because that moment of beauty is contrasted against such a dark world. It was beautifully set up, Cody. Walter Whitewalker writes, giraffes look better than the Little Mermaid CGI. I disagree. I thought the Little Mermaid stuff looked really good. Remember, Little Mermaid is also taking place in a fantasy underwater world, right? Whereas a giraffe is sitting there against a tree. So I personally think, like, I don't understand everybody's complaining about the Little Mermaid trail. I thought it was great, but whatever. We're not here to talk about Little Mermaid. Alex Von Gollum writes, when I played the game, to me, Joel was right. No questions asked. But with this rendition, I'm not sure anymore. The dilemma was greatly introduced. 100% agree, Alex. I felt like the dilemma, as you put it, is all the more stark with the live action version because we're really feeling the horror of what he's doing, because as Joel is running around that hospital killing people, he's a monster. He's a rampaging, like, serial killer. He's running around like straight up murdering people. And the reason he's killing a lot of them is because, like he said to Marlene, you'll just keep coming after her. You'll just keep trying to get her to try to save the world. So you got to die. And I felt like the show did a better job of making us feel the darkness of what Joel was doing. And it made the dilemma all the worse. I agree. All right, Daniel Vakura writes, the opening location was part 2 foreshadowing. Could be. I mean, I wondered about that too. We'll see if they're actually is saying that. Walter Whitewalker writes, when you see Ashley holding baby Ellie in the trailer, I thought, are we going to Blade Ellie's birth? Sure enough. Yeah, I mean, there is a reminiscence there of Blade, right? About, a vampire attack Blade's mother when she was pregnant with Blade, and hence he inherits those powers. There's a little, I mean, of course, Ellie has not inherited the power of the cordyceps, right? So it's not like Ellie can magically commune with the great fungi in the earth, the way, like, when something steps on a part of the fungus, the infected 2 miles away can sense it. No, like, she's not like she inherited the powers of the fungi, but there is a little bit of similarity there. All right, Danny Vakura writes, I remember playing the game 10 years ago and thinking I would have made the same choice. I wouldn't care about the world after losing so much. How are you going to disperse a cure around the world anyway? Well, they would have to find a way. Just like everything, you have to find a way. Here's the thing, too. I think Joel may have made a different decision if he hadn't have lost Sarah. Like if he was just a guy in the world, he met Ellie, he come to love her as a daughter and all that kind of stuff. He may have made a different choice at the end, but the fact that he was a father who already went through the trauma of losing a daughter once, and now he's feeling alive again and he has a daughter figure in his life again, and he knows what it's like to lose that daughter. He knows what it's like to lose that daughter. I wonder if he would have made a different decision if he hadn't have lost Sarah 20 years earlier. We'll never know. All right, Big Cookie writes, in defense of Joel's decision, why should he trust modern medicine? They failed to prevent an apocalypse and now claiming their only hope is through a shady, lethal extraction process. No thanks. I get it, but the world was also caught off guard. Like, remember, the world changed in 2 or 3 days. It's not like the global medical profession had 6 months to analyze, study, and figure things out. Nobody knew that cordyceps had mutated to the point that they could survive at the temperatures inside a human host. Nobody knew. And within like 48 hours, the world was gone, right? But again, I'll say what I said earlier. Of course, there was no way to know 100% for 100% it could have worked. But what he knew was that this was a chance. This was a chance the world had. Let me put it this way. Let's say you lived in that world, the world of The Last of Us, and you had a child. You had a child that you knew every day that child could be killed, either by raiders or by the infected and the cordyceps and all that. Every day you're living in danger, and because of the infected, there's food shortage, and you just know every single day your child may die, every single day. And you find out that another guy chose to save his kid over your kid and everybody else's kid in the world. If you were that other parent, would you be focused on, well, we don't know for sure that it would have worked? Or would you be focused on, there was a chance this could have saved the world and saved my child? Which would you have been focused on if you were a parent living in that world? Now, again, I'm not taking sides here. I'm like just playing up the dilemma. But I'm saying, if you were a parent in that world, which way would you look at it? Would you look at it and go, oh, yeah, I guess there was no 100% way we would have known it would have worked. Okay. Or would you have been, there was a chance we could have made a better world for my kid? I think, I'm not a parent myself, but I think you probably would be one on the other side. You would have been, there was a chance we could have saved the world. There was a chance you could have saved my kid. There was a chance you could have saved my neighbor's kid. But you decided your one kid was more important than all of our kids. I think that's how you would have looked at it then. But, Hype Heroes or FYP Heroes is saying, Latchat, it's all about perspective, 100%. 100%, it's all about perspective. And I love the fact that they're making us look at it from different perspectives. All right, next up. Daniel Vakur writes, I was generally surprised that they didn't have Joel run while carrying Ellie into the parking garage like the game. It's an iconic moment as you see the bright light and make it in. It's a weird cut. But you know what? Forget the game. Forget the game. Most people watching the show have never played the game. And for people watching the show, it completely worked the way it played. It completely worked. In my opinion, it completely worked the way it played. Nobody who hadn't played the game missed that shot. And I love the confrontation. I love the dialogue, and I love the way he shot. Oh my God. It was just so well put together, man. All right. Thanks for that, Daniel. Next up, Just a Sub 32 writes, the world took everything from Joel, so Joel took everything from the world. Yep. Yeah, and that's another legitimate way of looking for it, right? It's like, this world took my first daughter away from me. I'll let the world burn to not lose another one. It is a very selfish, self-centered attitude, but it's one we can kind of understand a little bit, isn't it? When you understand what he's been through and what he's lost, it's crazy. I love the way they did that. Daniel also writes again, I thought it was really a really good finale, but not a great one. It felt rushed to me, and where it needed an extra 5 to 10 minutes to let certain moments breathe. I don't agree. I didn't feel it. I thought it moved. Look, they arrived in the town. What needed to happen? They needed to arrive in town, get found by the Fireflies. Joel needed to be faced with the dilemma. Joel needed to make his decision. Joel needed to execute his decision and get Ellie out. I'm not quite sure which part felt wanting. I felt like they, if anything, they didn't need the first 10 minutes of the episode where they're feeding the giraffe and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, to me, it was completely beautiful and totally well worth it. Absolutely. But I never felt like anything was rushed. Like, I get people who played the game. This part of the game probably took like 3 hours. So I get going through that in like 40 something minutes, probably might have felt a little bit rushed that way. But as just somebody watching the show, I never felt like it felt rushed. But I mean, again, it's a matter of perspective. I'm sure there are probably many people who did feel like maybe it felt a little bit rushed. For me personally, I'm only speaking from my own perspective. I thought it felt like it just was the perfect length, but that's just me. All right. Cody Hatton writes, Ellie may be Joel's purpose, but Joel stripped away Ellie's purpose. It's unforgivable. Joel ruined his relationship with her forever. Listen, man, there's a reason he lies to her at the end. There's a reason Joel lies to her at the end, because he knows what you just said is completely true. And for those of you who know game 2, it causes a problem, right? It causes a problem. And that is a big part of it. It's like we're often trying to look at it from Joel's perspective as a parent, but we forget that not only was he taking away a chance for the world to be saved, he took away Ellie's choice. And yes, the Fireflies did the same thing by not telling her what they were going to do or giving her a choice. But we all agree Ellie would have made the choice to go through with the procedure, and Joel stole that from her. He stole it from her. I understand why he did it, but it doesn't, understanding why he did doesn't change the fact that he did steal that from her. It's a big thing, man. All right. Next up, Cody Hunt writes, Joel couldn't be more selfish. His love cost the survival of humanity. I hate it, but I understand it. He can't lose another daughter. See, that's the dilemma. Look, nobody thinking clearly would say the life of that one 14-year-old girl is more important than the lives of all the children in the world. No rational, sane person would say that. But love, as Mazin and Druckmann put it, love has a dark side, right? Love will make you do many wonderful things, but love will also make you do some very, very dark things. And again, what he did was indeed very selfish. Yes. But I think there are a lot of parents, and again, I'm not a parent, but I think there are a lot of parents who would tell us that's exactly what I would have done. It may not be right. It doesn't make it right, but it's exactly what I would have done if it was your child, right? So that's the dilemma. That's the dilemma, man. It's so, oh God, it's like one of the best things. And anyway, Justice Sub 32 writes, the giraffe scene is such a beautiful moment. It shows that even in a scary world like The Last of Us, we can still have innocence and beauty. And again, that's something that the whole show has done, right? The whole season has been about that. It's about finding something, whether it's Bill and Frank finding each other in episode 3, whether it's Ellie playing with Sam, and looking at comic books together and stuff like that, whether it's when Joel finds Ellie again and calls her baby girl and all of us wanted to cry, or whether it's a moment of just a beautiful thing of feeding a giraffe. The finding beauty in a world of darkness is so powerful in this show, and one of the big strengths of the show, I think. All right. The Everything Everywhere Entertainment writes, I loved how deliberate they were about the use of violence in the series, saying if it doesn't advance the story, it's just gratuitous and needs to be cut. To me, shows Druckmann is an amazing writer. I'll tell you what, that's another reason why I love something that happened in the last episode, right? If we go back to the last episode, Joel had evolved to the point that he doesn't want to hurt people anymore. Like, he used to not mind hurting people at all, but he doesn't want to hurt people anymore. Remember, he came across the sniper in the tower. He says, look, I don't want to hurt you. Like, please don't, please don't, please don't. And had to shoot him anyway. But he doesn't want to hurt people anymore. But in episode 8, when Ellie is missing and Ellie is in danger and he's got these guys tied up, I believe, like some people saying, oh, they didn't need to show us Joel torturing those guys. I contend they did, because we as the audience needed to feel it. We had to see, in order for us to go into episode 9, and if we're going to understand in episode 9, Joel running around the hospital killing all these fools, in episode 8, we have to see that that is where he's at. Because even though he said he didn't want to hurt people anymore, Ellie's in danger? I'm going to torture you. And even once I get from you what I want from you, this blade is going into you, dude. You're dead. Like, we had to see that and experience that so we could fully get that when we get into episode 9, we understand where Joel is at. He doesn't want to hurt people anymore, but the moment Ellie's in danger, the moment Ellie's at risk, the moment he's at risk of losing Ellie, the second daughter in his life, a switch gets thrown, dude. A switch gets thrown. And you're right. They knew how and when to use those moments. And they used them sparingly. Some people complain that they didn't have enough of it. Whatever. I could see that argument. But every time they did use it, it was meant to deepen our understanding of the story. Like, violence was never in the show just for the sake of having violence. It was always to tell the story. And I thought they did a great job of that, man. All right. Next up, we got Cody Hunt, who writes, time doesn't heal wounds, people do. I love that line. Time will numb pain. Time will numb it, but it's people that heal wounds. I did love that line. All right, Cody also writes, Joel is a whole new person in this episode. It felt seeing a friend who's recovered from drug abuse. He's enjoying life again. He sees a future. Yeah, and I think that all comes from the last episode, like when he finds her. And I think we've seen him really developing his emotional connection to Ellie over the last number of episodes, right? But I think he realizes himself when he sees her again coming out of the burning building and he throws his arms around her and all that kind of stuff. And he calls her baby girl. I can't help but wonder if he surprised himself. And I think he realized, I'm alive again. I've been dead for 20 years inside since Sarah died, but I'm alive again. And I wonder if that moment that he took Ellie in his arms at the end of episode 8 is the moment that he himself realized it. Then you're right. We come into episode 9 and he's a totally different guy. He's alive again. He is much more reminiscent of the Joel that we met at the beginning of episode 1, right? That Joel is the Joel we saw at the beginning of episode 9. And we hadn't seen that Joel in 20 years. And then he was faced with losing it all again. All right. Colin Tucker writes, overall, great season. Only critique is that I really do think they should have had one or two more major obstacles with the infected. Just my opinion, though. I mean, listen, I don't completely disagree with you, Colin. I mean, like, I did love those scenes. I did. And I would certainly not have complained if they gave us a couple of more of those scenes. However, that being said, how would that have narratively advanced the story? In that case, like every other time we've encountered infected and whatever, it was all about the narrative and the story that was going on, right? Like the first time that they come across infected in the building and, you know, she gets bit and all that kind of stuff. That was to really introduce us to this is the reality of the world they're living in. When it was Ellie and Riley, it was this is how Ellie lost her best friend and why she had to kill somebody for the first time. When it was outside of Kansas City, it was like, look what all this ultimately led to and look at what it cost. Every time they utilized the infected in the story, it was meant to advance the story or deeper understanding of it. And so while I am with you that it would have been fun to have a couple more of those scenes, narratively, did they need them? Did they need to be there? And I'm not sure that they did, but like I said, I would have gotten a kick out of seeing more of them too. All right. Next up, Jesse Has a Turtle writes, fun fact, Bella Ramsey used a mocap suit to play her younger self. I don't believe that. Oh, haha, just kidding. But the puns being interrupted was the saddest part of the episode. By the way, you know what was great about that? It wasn't just great that Joel asked to have the puns read. Did you see how Ellie lit up when Joel actually asked for the puns? Like, it made her so happy. It was a great moment, dude. It was a great moment in the show. All right. Frankie writes, the hospital scene of Joel wreaking havoc honestly felt like a mass shooting event. Well, it didn't feel like it, Frankie. It was a mass shooting event. It absolutely 100% was. The silence was deafening throughout the scene, and him shooting the guy who surrendered really blurred the morality. No, and that's the thing. We as the audience had to feel it. Like if they just told the story, like somebody was sitting around a campfire and just told the story. So he had to make a decision. Am I going to let them kill this little girl to maybe save the world? I say no. And he proceeded to go through the hospital and took out everybody in his way to save the little girl, right? There's something very sanitized about that. This episode gave us no sanitizing. We had to feel and witness the dark depths that Joel would go to save Ellie. Burn the world, to hell with the world, to hell with everybody else and anything else. I am saving that girl. And we had to see it. We couldn't just be told that, oh, he took out everybody that got in his way. Okay, that's very neat and tidy and clean. It was, and that's the part where Ray was like, oh, I don't know if I like what Joel's doing. Like after he took the guy out and he's incapacitated and still murdered him. The doctor saying, I can't let you take her. He could have shot him in the leg and left him on the ground. Nope. Pop. Right in the head. Right? I think it was important that we as the audience, from a narrative point of view, we as the audience had to experience it a little bit. And that was bold, man. That was bold of them to do. All right. Let's see. Next up, we've got Colin Tucker writes, I think it's simple. The fact that the Fireflies didn't let Ellie make the choice herself takes away any more morally righteous cause they believe in. I don't know that I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with that. What was at stake was nothing short than saving the world. That's what was at stake. Saving the world. And listen, I understood what Marlene said too. When Marlene, it was a very, very quick line in the episode, but Marlene explains it to Joel. It's like, look, we didn't let her know what was happening. So there was no fear. She wasn't afraid, right? She, like, when she went under the anesthesia, she didn't go under afraid or trembling or in terror. They thought they were just running some tests and they were putting her under. Like, she went under totally without fear. Remember, Marlene has known this child since since the day she was born, since the hour she was born. And it had to be incredibly hard on her. And Marlene made the choice that, look, Ellie is carrying, this needs to happen. This child is carrying the thing that could save the entire world. Like millions of children, if there are even millions of people left in the world, but let's say hundreds of thousands of children across the world, this is the key to saving all of them and saving the future of our species and the future of our planet. So this is happening. Now, we can explain that to the girl and then have her pissing herself in her last moments alive or the moments of being afraid and terrified and whatever. Or we can just tell her, hey, we're just going to run some tests. We're going to put you under, and she's totally calm and at peace and whatever. Again, I'm not justifying it, just like I wasn't justifying the stuff earlier in the show. I'm just saying, if you want to look at the dilemma, it was there. Do I think they should have told her? Yeah, probably. Yeah. But to say that them not giving her the choice takes away any importance of saving the planet and the future of humanity. I don't know that I agree with that. I don't know. I'm not really sure that I agree. Again, if you were a parent living in that world, If you were living in the world of The Last of Us and you had children, and it was your children's lives on the line, for them to find that cure by unfortunately killing one little girl could save all of your children and everybody's children. I don't know that it would even be a difficult choice for you or me for that instance. And again, that's the beauty of the dilemma. I love it when a movie and show can make us really have to think about that. But anyway, again, that's just me. All right. Next up, Alex von Gollum writes, something important to keep in mind is there was no guarantee Ellie's surgery would end in a cure. They weren't 100% sure it would work. Joel had a point. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. But you know what was 100% sure? It was 100% sure that it wouldn't work if they didn't do it. It was a 100% guarantee that the world would continue to be a burning hell if they didn't do the procedure. If they did, there's a chance they could save the world. If they don't, it's 100% guaranteed the world continues to live in darkness and more people will die every day. And pretty soon humanity will be wiped off the face of the planet. That's 100% guarantee. Whereas if they did do the procedure, there was a chance. There was a chance. So yeah, I mean, I think it's important too that they didn't say it would be guaranteed, because that would even take away some of the moral ambiguity, right? Like if they knew 100%, hey, the doctor already developed a cure. They tested it. They know that it works. But the only way they can mass produce it, 100% for sure, is if they get this brain matter from Ellie. And then it's a guarantee the world is saved. Well, then for us as the audience, that kind of alleviates the moral ambiguity, right? There's really not as much of a dilemma anymore, right? The way they did it, there's still that dilemma that we as the audience have to wrestle with. It's a moral question that I don't think there's an easy answer to. And that's the great thing about it. Anyway, thanks for that, Alex. All right, next up. Luke Batman 0707 writes, what is your guys' thoughts on Joel's decision of killing the Fireflies to save Ellie? In my opinion, I understand why he made his decision, but he did it for his own selfish needs. Thoughts. Yeah, no, that's all true. Listen, again, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I don't think any of us would disagree. At least I don't think there's going to be a lot of us who would disagree that the right thing to do would have been to let them do the procedure. I think most people would agree with that. The right thing to do would have been to give the world a chance to survive. However, what is the right thing to do and what would you have done in Joel's situation are two different questions. Again, and I love the way Druckmann and Mason put it after the show. Love is a beautiful thing, but love will also make you do horrible things. You will do horrible things for love, the love of a child, whatever. A parent will let the world burn to save their child. So they're two separate questions. What is the right thing is one question. What would you have done is another question. And sometimes we as human beings confuse the two. Sometimes we think, well, what would I have done? I would have done this. Therefore, that's the right answer. No. Just because it's what you would have done, that doesn't mean that would have been the right thing to do. I mean, maybe even all of us would have done what Joel would have done, but it wouldn't have made it the right thing. The right thing would have been to give the world a chance to survive. Save the millions of people left in the world, try to give our civilization and our culture a chance to come back and not risk the extinction of humanity. That would have been the right thing. But what would I have done if it was my kid? I don't know. I might have done exactly what Joel would have done. Or at least I would have tried. I probably wouldn't have been as effective at it as he was. All right, next up. Justice Sub 32 writes, man, I hope killing that surgeon does not have significant consequences in the near future. Oh, I'm sure it's totally fine. Totally fine. Nothing, what could possibly go wrong? Yeah. For people who know the second game, you know exactly what's coming, man. You know exactly what's coming. All right. Last question we're going to take, and then we're going to take just a brief little 2-minute break here as so I can refill my drink. Justice Sub 32 writes, I felt Joel was reliving the early days of the outbreak. I completely agree. When rescuing Ellie, but instead of being helpless about Sarah, he took action to save Ellie. Again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, a little bit earlier, that I don't know what Joel would have done if he had not already been through this exact same trauma. Trying to save his little girl, and he couldn't. And she died. And it destroyed him. And it took 20 years for him to feel alive again. And as soon as he feels alive again and he's got another daughter figure in his life, all of a sudden, he's at the risk of losing her again. Whew. I mean, like, again, just forget the fact that it's a man trying to save his daughter figure. It's a man who's already been through this and lost one daughter and now is never going to let that happen again if he can help it. You know what I mean? God, that was powerful. Oh, shit, man. That was so powerful. So powerful. All right, guys, listen. We will pick it up with the next question coming to us from Havoc Thoughts in just a moment. Again, just give me about a minute and a half here. I'm going to go and refill my drink, rest my voice for just a second, and we're going to take this opportunity to thank the sponsor of our video today. I love these guys, our friendly folks over at Manscaped. Hey, guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's video, Manscaped. Breaking news, Manscaped now sells beard products. That's right, they are once again revolutionizing men's grooming with the brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. Now you can finally use Manscaped products to make your drapes match your carpet by going to manscaped.com and using the code Campea for 20% off and free shipping. It all starts with the Beard Hedger. This thing is a juggernaut of fixing faces. First off, this cordless trimmer has a rotary wheel that gives you 20 hair cutting lengths, all with one guard. So no more messy drawers full of extra add-ons. You also get the beard shampoo and conditioner. Because guys, you gotta remember that all of your hair is different. Your beard hair is more coarse and easier to damage than the hair on your head. Next, the kit has Manscaped's beard oil. The oil relieves dryness both on the beard and the skin beneath. You then cap it off with the Beard Balm that shapes, styles, moisturizes, and tames for a sculpted look. The Pro Beard Kit also comes with 3 special gifts: a beard brush, comb, and scissors to ensure your beard is ready to impress. So get 20% off and free shipping with the code Campea at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use the code Campea. Manscaped Beard Hedger, 1 stroke, 1 guard, 20 lengths. And thank you to our friends at Manscaped for sponsoring this episode of the John Campea Show. All right. Let's get back to it here, guys, and get back to your questions here. We're going to pick things up here with Havoc Thoughts, who super chatted in $20. Thank you, Havoc, for supporting our channel on that level, man. Super appreciate that, dude. It's very generous of you. He writes in, watching Joel tear through the Fireflies facility reminded me of Bill's letter, especially the part where he says, "That's why men like you and me are here. We have a job to do. And God help any motherfucker that stands in our way." You know what, Havoc? That is brilliant insight. I didn't even think back to that letter. That letter was so profound, and really, that letter became a foreshadowing of that very scene. I didn't even think about that, man. I didn't even think about that. That is really, really good insight, because he goes, that's what we do, our purpose. We're protectors, Bill said to Joel. We're protectors. And now, of course, he was speaking to Joel as if protecting. Guys, help me again. Well, the name of the woman that he lost earlier on, who got bit and then got the deep tongue kiss from the quarterstaff. I can't. Tess, thank you, Calix. Of course, Bill was talking about him protecting Tess, but very reminiscent of that. And like, yeah, I should have totally thought about that. And that's true. He has one. Joel sees himself as having one job in this world, and God help anybody, whether you're even a doctor just trying to save the world. God help you if you're in his way of trying to save that girl. That's great insight, man. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you for that, Havoc. All right. Next up, we got Ketchup on Eggs, who writes, Laura Bailey, who plays Abby in part 2, made a cameo appearance as one of the nurses in the operating. I did not know that. I had no idea. Like, I honestly thought that in the episode, before I watched the episode, I honestly thought that we were going to get a scene of after Joel leaves the operating room, that we were going to see a girl come into the operating room, like going, "Dad, Dad," and then seeing the dead surgeon going, "Dad," and freaking out. I honestly thought they were going to do that. I know that doesn't happen in the game, not in game one, but I really thought they were going to do that. But I didn't know that they used her as a little guest spot there. That's a really cool thing to know. Thanks, Ketchup. All right. Just a Sub 32 writes, "Well, off to play part 2. I think a lot of people today are off playing part 2 of The Last of Us." I think that's a lot of people, Just a Sub. All right. Fangblaze writes, "Man, I loved this show. Me too. It's surpassed. I love Yellowstone. Cannot wait for it to come back, but it's surpassed Yellowstone for my favorite show on TV right now." The ninth, how am I going to pronounce this? Ninth, Shinigami writes, "Last of Us is great, but in my opinion, it's not the best video game adaptation. First is Cyberpunk. Second is Arcane. With Mario soon, I wonder if it can stay in third." Here's the thing about Arcane. Listen, Arcane is my all-time number one favorite animated show. It's my all-time, after just one season, it is my favorite animated show of all time. I love Arcane. I don't know that I count it as a video game adaptation because it's not even an adaptation. Like Last of Us is an adaptation of the game. Arcane is completely original. It's completely original. Like you could have made that, it's like with The Last of Us, you couldn't just change Joel's name to Ted and changed Ellie's name to, Rebecca. And, you couldn't have just changed those and pretended like it wasn't The Last of Us. It was The Last of Us, right? Whereas Arcane, and again, it's my favorite anime show of all, but Arcane is not the game. It has nothing to do with the game. Like it has zero to do with the game. So I'm not even sure I count that. And was Cyberpunk even an adaptation? I wasn't aware of that. Anyway, okay. Mario, we'll see how Mario does. All right, next up. Logan Hoyne writes, "Do you think the big catalyst for the second game happens early in season 2? Well, obviously we know that it does. Or do you think HBO will prolong it a little bit longer than the game?" No, I actually think the main catalyst, and we all know what I'm talking about, I honestly think it happens in episode 1. Now, there is a chance it happens in episode 2. There is a chance that it happens in episode 2. But if I had to put $5 on it, I'm going to bet it happens in episode 1. I think it does. But I definitely don't think it happens in episode 3 or after that, because the meat of the story of of the second part of Last of Us 2, the vast meat of that story can only take place after that catalyst moment. It can only take place after that. And I don't think they'll wait till episode 3 or episode 4 to do it. I kind of think it'll be episode 1. It could be episode 2 as well. We'll see. All right. Thanks for that, Logan. Next up, Matt Fitch writes, "Ashley Johnson's cameo was so perfect. She was beyond incredible. What a devastating emotional intro. Loved her leaving Ellie, her famous knife and jacket." Listen, Ashley Johnson's performance in that was Emmy-worthy. Emmy-worthy. Now, listen, I watched Ashley Johnson in things like Blind Spot, and she was good. I've always liked her. I've always liked her. But I never thought she was capable of giving a performance like what she gave in those scenes. Like, go back and watch those scenes again. The performance she gives is absolutely emotionally shaking. It really is. Loved it. Like, absolutely loved. She was great in that, Matt. All right, next up. Storm of Dragons 771 writes, "This Nietzsche quote is a sums up of the theme of the episode and series. What is done out of love always takes place beyond good and evil." Ooh, that is a great quote. "What Joel did is neither right nor wrong. It just is." No, I think there is wisdom in that quote from perspective, right? What is done out of love always takes place beyond good and evil. I believe that is true for the person taking the action, right? I believe that is true for what is taking for the individual taking the action. I think to the individual taking the action, that who's acting out of what they perceive to be love, whatever they do is neither good nor evil. It just is. I agree with that. However, I do believe there is a superseding morality that goes beyond that. Let's say, for example, there's a young woman who truly falls in love with the married man next door. And to give herself a chance to have that love, she goes and murders that man's wife so that he is, not hinged that. Are we going to say that was neither right nor wrong? It just is. Now, from her perspective, it can feel that way. But to us as more objective outsiders looking at that, no, we very clearly can apply a good or evil tag on that. Like we can easily put a tag on that. That was wrong. That was evil. So I don't think that I love that quote. It is not absolutist, right? You can't just do anything in the name of love and it is neither right nor wrong. No, that's not true. That's not true at all. But it's a great quote for understanding. Again, that's the magic word of today is perspective. It's perspective. Walter White Walker saying she's not saving a life though. No, but one could argue that what Joel did was not save one life. What Joel did was condemn millions of others to die. It's a matter of perspective. Did Joel save one life, or did Joel condemn millions of others to die? One can't be right. One can't be true without the other also being true. So again, not meaning to be morally absolutist, not at all. But I don't think resisting the urge to be absolutist means that it's a completely nebulous either, right? I don't think that just becomes a free-for-all. And that's why it's a dilemma. I think that's why it is in itself a dilemma. All right. Next up. Moda Awesome writes, I sobbed so hard at this episode. Perfect season. I'll tell you what. I mean, listen, I don't call any season perfect. If I were the type of person that could call a season of television perfect, this might be it. And again, I won't, because I don't call any season of television. There's always things they could have done to improve, but it's as damn close to perfect as I can think. All right. Boone Lee Tan writes, are pandemic jokes still too soon or topical? I think I'm one of these people that you have to be sensitive to the people you're around, but I'm also the type of person that I believe in what the guys from South Park once said. You got to be able to laugh at everything or you can't laugh at anything. So interpret that as you will, Boone Lee Tan. All right. Scotty Hale writes, seeing Belle and Pedro this episode made me so excited to see the museum and the guitar scene that we all love from part 2. Yeah, and listen, throughout the episode, right? Or not the episode, throughout the season of The Last of Us Season 1 were many foreshadowings of these great moments that we know are coming in Season 2. Everything from chats around a fire about astronauts, or, maybe I can teach you how to play guitar. Like just little things like that for people. Like the great thing about The Last of Us is you didn't need to know a single thing about the video game to watch and love this show. But at the same time, they peppered in little things like those for people who do know the game to catch and really appreciate. And I think they did a great job at that. All right. Next up, Jacob Fio writes, I wish the episode is longer. It's too short. I mean, I think it did what it needed to do very well. I would have liked it to have gone a little longer. I understand that's not what it does in the game. But once they get to, back to Tommy's town and they're standing there looking at the town in the distance, I would have appreciated another 15 minutes, maybe them getting back to town, Tommy giving them a big hug. I mean, I would have liked to see a little bit of an epilogue, maybe, but I understand that's not what happened in the game, so I'm okay with it. All right. Next up, John Agote Rodriguez writes, If I went through what Joel went through, I'd probably do the same thing. I think a lot of people would agree with you, man. As a viewer, I understood why he did what he did. This is the first time I saw him in an antagonistic way. I felt divided. And that's the beautiful thing, John, about this thing. I think that's exactly what Druckmann and Mazin wanted. They wanted to make us feel divided. That, oh my God, he really shouldn't have did that. I mean, I might have done the exact same thing if I were in his shoes, but he shouldn't have done that. But I probably would have, but it was wrong. That's the thing. They wanted to create the scenario and portray it in such a way that we felt divided. And that's why I loved when Ray said, oh man, I don't know if I like what Joel's doing. Like, that's exactly what they were trying to get at. And dude, how effective has it been? I've been thinking about it all day. I'm not gonna lie. I've been thinking about it all day. And I am completely divided on the issue. 100%. And that's the beautiful thing about it, man. All right. Evil Seed X writes, do you think they have the balls to kill Joel off in the first? Well, I mean, this is why I kind of ruined people at the beginning. There'll probably be some details because somebody was going to spoil something. All right. Do you think they have the balls to kill Joel off in the first episode of season 2, or will they try to drag it out given Pedro Pascal's popularity? Okay. Bad storytellers will alter their stories to fit an actor. That's a poor story. If they're going to be true, they're going to tell the best story possible. And as I mentioned before, I completely believe they're going to do it either in episode 1, which I would put my $5 on episode 1. The end of episode 1, I bet Joel dies. But it could also very well be episode 2. I do not see them stretching it in episode 3. I don't see them stretching it in episode 3. They have shown us from the very beginning, the story is always supreme. The supremacy of story above all other things. They're not going to go, well, wait a minute. Pedro Pascal's kind of popular now. Let's change the story. That's what bad storytellers would do. These are world-class, particularly Mazin, world-class storytellers. They're not going to do that. I would be completely shocked if they don't do it by the end of episode 2. And I actually think it's going to happen in episode 1, but we'll find out. All right, Ryan Lawner writes, all the production design on this show reminds me of Ebert's quote about Kermit riding a bike. I don't want to know how they did it. I prefer to think it's real. That is such a great quote. And such a great, also an insight into the mind of us as audience members in the suspension of disbelief, right? That's why do you remember in that episode, which episode was it again, where they start off showing up Graham Greene's cabin and they're hiking through the wilderness, in the snowy wilderness, and one of the wide drone shots, you actually see the camera crew off to the side. It was so jarring to that. But that is a great quote, Ryan. I love that one. Thanks for sharing that. All right, next up. Mr. Jim Breeze sends in a $20 super chat. Thank you, Jim, for supporting us on that level, man. Jim writes, interesting fact from the official podcast. Druckmann talked about the reaction of play testers to the end of The Last of Us game. 50% of testers who were childless agreed with Joel. 100% of testers who were parents agreed with Joel. Yeah, again, that's the issue of perspective, right? Like if you're a parent, you probably, again, I'm not a parent, so I can't speak to it, but it seems to me that if you're a parent, you would burn the world to protect your kid. It doesn't make it right, but you would probably burn the world. And I bet that if they did a same test of the show, because I think the show makes the darkness of what Joel does a little bit more powerful. It probably wouldn't be 100% either, but again, it shows that discrepancy over perspective. All right, very well pointed out, Jim Breeze. Thanks for sharing that, because I didn't see the post-podcast thing. I didn't see that. All right, Paul J. Jepson writes, she was totally with Joel, by the way, parent logic. Oh, did I miss something? Oh, you know what? I bet that's a part 1, part 2. Okay, let me read this top thing. Paul J. Jepson writes, so happy with the show because I was able to experience it with my mother. Nice. I felt like I was falling in love with these characters again. That's why I heard that a lot. And then, by the way, she was totally with Joe. Parent logic. Completely parent logic. 100% parent logic. No doubt. Which is why it's so thick. Dude, that's so awesome. There's nothing better than great movies or great TV shows that we get to experience with people who are important to us. Because those stories become shared experiences that we have together, right? I love that. Some of my favorite memories over the past decade has been traveling back home to Canada. And there's a little tradition we have that when I go back to Canada, I take my family out to a movie. And I love those moments. I love doing that. And that's cool that you were able to do that, man. All right. Next up. Derek Large writes, Jeffrey Wright played a small but important role in part 2. I don't remember that. I don't remember. I love Jeffrey Wright. His voice is one of the best in Hollywood. Do you think he will come back to play the same character? No, probably not. I mean, they haven't been bringing people back from the game to play their same characters. So my guess would be no, but could they find a role for Jeffrey Wright in the show? Maybe. Jeffrey is a busy man though, dude. Jeffrey Wright is a busy man. So can they find time for him to do it and fly him up to Calgary to go shoot that? Who knows? But I could see them doing it. All right. Derek Large writes, with the success of Neil and Craig had with this show, do you see more studios letting the original creators have more say in the development of future game adaptations? No. And I'll tell you why. Because there's two very, very big things here that everybody overlooks. Number one is Craig Mazin. Craig Mazin was not the creator of the game. Craig Mazin is coming off of doing maybe the greatest limited series of all time. And I don't mean that with any hyperbole at all. Chernobyl may be the greatest limited series of all time. If you guys have not seen Craig Mazin's Chernobyl, you're making bad life choices. You need to watch Chernobyl. It is phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal. And it is no coincidence that Craig Mazin is on this show and this show being so good, right? If it was Neil Druckmann and just some average showrunner out there that they just hired to bring in, I don't believe this show turns out to be as good as it is. That's the one big difference is Craig Mazin. The second difference is Druckmann isn't just some average game creator. Druckmann literally made the greatest story ever told in a video game. Last of Us 1 and Last of Us 2. I even put the story in Last of Us 2 ahead of the story of Last of Us 1, but whatever. He was a guy who made the greatest story ever told in a video game. No story's ever been told, in my opinion. It's all subjective, of course. In my opinion, there has never been a better story told in a video game than that. I mean, there are some obvious other great ones too. Red Dead Redemption, God of War, Uncharted 4. There are some great ones. Very few great ones, but there are some great ones. But none of them are as good as Last of Us. So it's not like if they just go to, I don't know, the guy who, some guy who created the latest Sonic game and saying, well, I mean, Neil Druckmann, that we had him on to do Last of Us and it turned out to be amazing. I guess we should let any game developer I just think there's a massive difference. It's a very unique situation where you happen to have a game creator who just happened to put together the best story ever told in a video game, and then you matched him with maybe the single most gifted showrunner right now in the world in Craig Mazin. So that makes a very unique set of circumstances. So no, I don't think the success of The Last of Us is just going to make other studios go, well, hell, just let the creator of that game have more input on the show. I'm not sure that that's the right move, and I don't think they'll necessarily do it. Now, if, say, that kind of success continues on with, say, the God of War series. Let's say the God of War series comes out, and I don't know, it could come about eventually, but not just from one example. At least that's my guess. That's my guess, at least. All right, thanks for that, Derek. Next up. Never Lose Your Nerd writes, loved the season and the show. Only thing that disappointed me was the season felt so short, and so did the finale because I wanted more. I agree. I mean, but you guys know me, right? I don't like the new era of 8-episode seasons, 9-episode seasons, 10-episode seasons. I mean, what can I say? I grew up in an era where a season of television meant 20, 22, 23 episodes of TV. And I would love, if it was a show that I liked, I loved every episode. And so I have not yet adjusted to the new reality. I mean, I'm kind of adjusted, but I'm not all the way there yet, where I've adjusted to the reality of 8 episodes and you're done, 9 episodes and you're done, right? I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan. That being said, I have loved this season of The Last of Us. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. And it's always a great thing. It's a lot like a good orgasm, man. It's a great thing when you can completely satisfy and yet leave them wanting more at the same time. You don't want to leave them wanting more and unsatisfied. You don't want to leave them satisfied and then think, yeah, I'm good. I don't need that again. You want to completely satisfy and completely leave them wanting more. The Last of Us was just a great orgasm, man. It was a great orgasm. It did both. Satisfied, made them pant and want more. And yeah, I dig it. All right. Next up, CJ Rebirth said she had a nice smile. Again, not saying you don't. And again, you could tell, I love the way Pedro played that scene because he was almost feeling guilty about it. You know, Sarah would have liked you. I'm not saying you're not girly. I mean, that was actually because he was feeling awkward and all that kind of stuff. I love that moment. I really did. All right. Jonathan Cahoon writes, love the episode and the show. I hope they split part 2 into 2 seasons. The extra subtle close-up shot of the doctor. Oh boy. I mean, yeah, there was definitely foreshadowing that. You know what? I believe they will. I don't necessarily believe they have to. I don't think they necessarily have to, but I believe they will. This is my guess. I have no insider information. I think they will split the second game into 2. I think they'll split it into 2 seasons. I think they will. I think they'll split it into 2 seasons. At least that's just my guess. All right. Kyle Fielder is saying it's confirmed now. Did they confirm that they're going to split the second game into 2 seasons? Warlocks is also saying they confirmed it. Now, are there reports saying that they're going to, or has the studio and HBO actually confirmed that? Michael Gonzalez is saying yes. Okay, well, there you go. I guess I was right. They are going to do that. And it makes sense because, man, the story in the second one is, oh God, it's so emotional. That makes sense to me. All right. Let's see. Next up, we got Angel Leon who writes, one of the nurses was Lauren Bailey, the actress who played Abby. Somebody mentioned that a little bit earlier. I had no idea about that. That was really cool to find out. Next up, Luke Batman 0707 writes, do you think the War Adapt Part 2? Do you think the War Adapt Part 2 into 3 seasons because there's no third game to adapt? What are your thoughts? I don't think they would try. Listen, I don't think they'll Hobbit it. Remember The Hobbit, when they first announced they were doing The Hobbit, it was going to be 2 movies. All right. And for the longest time, what they announced that they're doing The Hobbit, but The Hobbit was going to be 2 movies. And then they made the mistake and they suddenly decided to split it into 3. They took the shortest book and they split it into 3 movies. And that was a mistake. I don't know that I could see them splitting that second game into 3 seasons. I think that would be watering it down a bit. I don't see them doing that. Apparently they've already confirmed that they're going to do 2. And that makes sense. And probably by the time, look, the reality is we're probably 3 years away from getting season 3, which would be part 2 of game 2, right? That's probably 3 years away. By that time, we're probably pretty close to getting a third Last of Us game. So yeah, that's just my guess. It's just a guess. All right. Thanks, Luke. Next up, Ian Lewis writes, was this the best zombie apocalypse show? In my opinion, yes. And I don't mean that as any disrespect to The Walking Dead or Fear the Walking Dead or Grocery Center of The Walking Dead or Fashion Tips with The Walking Dead or however many Walking Dead shows there are now. It's not any shade on that. I liked The Walking Dead for a while. I thought it was really good too. But yes, this is the best zombie. And please, I don't let me hear saying, they're not zombies. They're zombies. They're zombies. If they walk like zombies and talk like zombies and they turn people by biting them like zombies, and it's a zombie show. You can put it in that subgenre. Anyway, yeah, I think this is the best one. I think this is the best one. And I don't mean that as any kind of recency bias or anything like that. I really do think it's the best one. All right. Next up, Tracy Dale writes, really love the flashback to Ellie's mom. Oh God, me too. And a little more of Marlene's relationship with her, and loved Ashley Johnson getting to play Anna. See, look, here's the thing. And again, for me, it comes back to Marlene, because it gave, if it wasn't for that first scene, understanding that Marlene and Anna had been friends since childhood, that Anna entrusted Ellie to Marlene, and the emotional connection there and all that kind of, the familial connection there. Then the last scene when Joel murders, the whole conversation between the two of them and Joel murdering her and all that kind of stuff, it still would have been a very, very good scene. But that scene at the beginning gave so much more emotional weight to the scene at the end. You know what I mean, Tracy? And for that reason, I just freaking adored it. I just absolutely loved that. And I thought it was very effective. All right. Ahmed E writes, it was a real giraffe for the scene. Simply wow. What? Like, I wondered about that, because I remember watching, because listen, Anne and Ray and I took them to Canada a couple of years ago. And where I live in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, there's a place called the African Lion Safari. And at the African Lion Safari, you can actually take your car and drive through the zoo. And you literally have the monkeys coming up and sitting on your car. Lions will walk up right up to your car. You drive very slowly through the park. It's like Jurassic Park in a way, right? And at one point, giraffes will, you can roll down your window, and giraffes will actually stick their heads, and they did. These giraffes stuck their heads in our car, and we were able to feed them. It was amazing. And I remember Ray looked at it and said, is that giraffe real? Now, I have no idea if it was, I'm just saying it looked real to me, but I have no idea if it was real or not. I'm seeing the General Grievous 19 in the live chat saying the giraffe was real. The background was not. Well, I knew the background wasn't real. I mean, we all knew the background wasn't real, but I mean, it looked great, but we all knew that wasn't real. So apparently, yes, the giraffe was real. I mean, because look at the way the tongue moved, it just looked real. And because I have been up close to a giraffe head taking Ritz crackers from my hands. But yeah, that is very cool to find out. Thanks for sharing that, Ahmed. All right, next up. Rashawn Thompson just sends in a $20 super chat badge just to be supportive. Thank you, Rashawn. And guys, that'll do it for this installment, our final installment of The Last of Us open spoiler discussion after show. I'll tell you what, guys, I know, if you'll indulge me here with some closing thoughts on the season, with your permission. I remember going back about a year ago, maybe, when they announced Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal. And oh my God, the internet was mad. Woo, the internet was mad. They hated the casting of Bella Ramsey, and they hated the casting of Pedro Pascal. Oh, they hated it. This show was already garbage. This show has failed before the... I remember I went a few weeks ago, I actually started going back and started watching some of those old videos. This show is doomed before it even starts, and blah, blah, blah. And everybody hated it. And listen, I admit too, like, most video game adaptations suck. They mostly do. And so while I thought the casting of Bella Ramsey was brilliant, and I thought the casting of Pedro Pascal was brilliant, because I'm big fans of both of them, and I love what she did in Game of Thrones and all that kind of stuff. But even though I liked the casting, I was trepidatious as well. I didn't know if it was going to turn out to be any good, because most video game stuff does not turn out to be very good. But man, I'll tell you what. The moment I saw episode 1, I was all that trepidation, all the doubts, all the concerns I had about whether or not they could really make this feel like a great show, not just another cheap video game adaptation. Can they make this feel like a legitimate HBO-worthy kind of show? The questions went out the window. They did such a masterful job in this series of making us feel emotional connections with the characters, of feeling the darkness and depths of the despair of the world and the tragedy that befell the world, about human beings finding momentary flashes of light within that world and finding connection within that world. And then sometimes realizing that that kind of connection can make us do things that maybe we didn't think was possible for us to do. And it has become event television for me to watch every single week and fall in love with the show more and more every week. The episode of Bill and Frank is simply one of the best episodes of television I've ever seen. I put it maybe in my top 15, maybe even my top 10 best episodes of television I've ever seen. A little note, my favorite episode of television ever, Battlestar Galactica, The Second Exodus. That is my favorite episode of television of all time, just so you know. But yeah, this has been an amazing ride. And more importantly than that, it becomes, not enough people watch it for it to be Arcane. I love Arcane. It's my all-time favorite anime show. But I think 6-7 years from now, we may look back and say it was The Last of Us that finally broke the floodgates and really opened the floodgates for great video game adaptations to happen, and happen maybe on something of a consistent level. Maybe. And anyway, guys, it has been great to be on this journey with you as we've been watching this show. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight. Thank you especially to all you guys who sent in those super chats. Number one, because you gave us great, fun perspectives and things to talk about. And number two, you supported this channel as you did it. Guys, thank you so much for coming along for the ride. Don't forget, come back and join us again tomorrow for the newest episode of the John Campea Show, back to our regular time. I had family important stuff that I had to take care of in Los Angeles this morning. That's why today's John Campea Show was delayed, but we're back to our regular start time tomorrow. Hope you guys, oh, by the way, I'm going to make an announcement here to you guys who are here and have stuck around here. I'm going to give you a little bit of news that nobody else knows yet. It's not world shaking, but interesting little thing here. I've been getting a lot of requests from people lately to bring back the mailbag format. You know, right now, the only way on both open mic and on the John Campea Show, the only way you can get in a question and get it answered is if you're watching the video live and you can send in a question live. We used to do a thing called mailbag where we had like a tip link where people could send in questions anytime, and then we gather up those questions and answer them in videos we call mailbags. And I put up, so since a lot of people asked me for it, I decided to put up a poll in our community tab, and I asked people, hey, do you prefer asking questions live in something like an open mic, or would you prefer us going back to a mailbag? 75% of you guys said mailbag. So, tomorrow afternoon, I'll put up the link in the community tab to the tip link a little bit later tonight, but tomorrow afternoon, we're going to have a mailbag episode of Open Mic. We're still going to call it Open Mic, but we're going to collect the questions the way we used to do mailbag. So you don't have to be there watching live. If you have a comment or opinion or question you want to ask and have it asked on one of our shows, you can do that anytime. So thank you guys for your reward. Who cares? Your reward for being able to, for sticking around to the end of the video is you were the first to find out about this, and we'll be doing that then. All right, guys, that'll do it for me. I got a wife who's a little bit under the weather back at home, so I'm going to get back home so I can rub her feet a little bit more and serve her ice cream and soup, because that's what a good husband does. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. Cannot wait to see you tomorrow. My name's John Campea, everybody, and until next time, my friends, bye-bye.